Alright, besties, grab your snacks, get cozy in those PJs, and turn down the lights.
Because this is not your average slumber party. These stories might just keep you up all night.
We've got the ghostly, the grim, and a little bit of the goofy. Perfect for anyone who likes their scares with a side of fun.
And hey, if you're new here, make sure you hit subscribe and follow us on all of our socials because you won't want to miss the next scary story. Welcome to Chasing Midnight!
I'm so excited for this.
So we're back, and technically, listen, we have posted some videos on YouTube, but technically, this is our premiere. You can see our faces. We have a setup.
For people watching in, and you've only heard us say our names, I'm Madison.
I'm Isabel.
And you're here with us on Chasing Midnight.
And I will say, so tonight's topic is pretty heavy. It's pretty dark. Okay, so we both decided we're gonna do serial killer cases. Neither of us has any info on the others. We knew the topic and that was about it. So there's nothing that we have shared with each other ahead of time. So you're gonna learn about it with us.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. So my case is on Ted Bundy. I want to go into some of the backstory and early life things before I get into the major events and all the crimes and stuff.
Okay.
So Ted was born on November 24th, 1946 in Vermont, and his mother, Eleanor, was unwed and sent to a home for single mothers to avoid scandals. Ted was raised believing his grandparents were his parents and his mother was his sister.
Oh.
I know. This deception shaped him early on with identity crisis and all this other stuff going on.
Yeah, as it would anybody, let's be so real.
So as an adult, Bundy claimed he felt abandoned, humiliated when he learned the truth. Friends remembered him as intelligent but shy and socially awkward. And teachers noted his high IQ, but there were dark memories. And I found these in testimonies from families and all that there was a fascination with knives, watching people through windows, and once surrounding his aunt in bed with sharp kitchen utensils while she slept.
Like she's laid out on the bed and he does a circle around her and
pretty much
sharp things.
Pretty much, yes.
So had she moved in her sleep or done anything? Okay.
I love the thunder. I'll be honest.
It is.
It's very.
I know.
It's adding a lot right now. Okay, so the fascination with knives and the surrounding his aunt in bed with sharp kitchen utensils came from testimonies by the family members. But by the early 1970s, Bundy had polished up. He studied psychology at the University of Washington, and then he dated a woman known as Stephanie Brooks, that's what we're calling her, in college. And when Stephanie ended the relationship, Bundy was devastated, and many of his future victims resembled her. They had long brown hair, parted in the middle, and another thing I want to add was Bundy also worked at a suicide hotline. Creepily enough, alongside author Anne Rule, who wrote the book called The Stranger Beside Me. And she's a big thriller author and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And she wrote a book because she worked with him right next to him at the suicide hotline. I also want to talk about his MOs before we get started. Bundy lured his victims by faking injuries, wearing slings, using crutches, etc., and asking for help carrying books or loading his car. And sometimes he would pretend to be a cop or someone in authority. Then he would abduct them, often in broad daylight. He would return to the crime scenes and perform acts with the corpse. I'm gonna keep going.
Yeah, okay. I just need a second.
He also kept several heads as trophies in his apartments and escalated in brutality. His later murders were more savage.
Heads?
Heads.
Just putting them out on display?
Sitting, yes. In his apartment. Ted was dangerous because of his charm, manipulation, and law savvy. He was well spoken, handsome, intelligent, and he knew how to gain trust and deeply understood human psychology. Hence him taking psychology in college.
Mm-hmm.
He studied law as well and used it to stall his execution during his trial.
Wow.
Yeah. He, even after being caught, he denied everything for years. But now I want to get into the crimes of everything. So I gave a
Okay.
little backstory, a little rundown real quick of
Yeah.
who he is, all this sort of stuff, so that you're not confused as I continue talking.
Okay. Okay, let's go.
So the crimes occurred from 1974 to 1978 across 7 states. There was Washington, Oregon, Florida, California, Colorado, Utah, and Idaho. And Bundy confessed to 30, but the actual count may be over 100.
Oh my. Okay.
And most of these women were college students or around the age of college students. Bundy's confirmed murders begin in 1974 in Seattle, Washington. His first known victim was 21-year-old Linda Healy, who vanished from her basement bedroom on January 31st. Blood stains on her pillow suggested she'd been bludgeoned while sleeping. Hit over the head.
Yeah.
Straight on. Bundy later confessed that he dressed her and drove her to a secluded area where he strangled and murdered her before dumping her. Her skull was later found at Taylor Mountain. That's going to be a thing. Remember Taylor Mountain. Over the next 6 months, young women disappeared from Washington and Oregon at an alarming rate. There was Donna Manson, 19, vanished while walking to a concert. Donna's remains were never found. There is Susan Rancourt, 18, disappeared after a meeting while walking to her dorm. Her skull was found years later on Taylor Mountain. Then you have Roberta Parks, 22, was abducted on her way to meet friends. Her remains were found on
Taylor Mountain.
Taylor Mountain. Brenda Ball, 22, was last seen leaving a tavern. Her skull was found near Issaquah, Washington. If I mess that up, I apologize. Georgianne Hawkins, 18, vanished while walking between dorms. Bundy later described approaching Hawkins with a briefcase and crutches, asking for help with his books after striking her unconscious, and said he hid her body near the Issaquah site. On July 14th, 1974, in broad daylight and at a crowded lake, let me say that, broad daylight, crowded lake, Bundy abducted 2 women in one day. Witnesses remembered a handsome man with an arm in a sling introducing himself as Ted and asking for help loading a sailboat. Janice Ott, 23, agreed to help him and she was never seen alive again. But then 4 hours later, Denise Naslin, 19, also went missing after leaving her friends. Both girls' remains were found in a wooded area east of Issaquah. This was Bundy's boldest move.
Yeah.
Dozens of witnesses saw his face, his car, and even heard his name. So, like, we were starting off strong here.
Listen, I don't even have words.
I know. Researching this entire thing and reading that part, I was like, how did this work? Because when it did, I have a feeling it brought up his confidence quite a bit. And we'll see that later on.
Yeah. He's full of himself now. He just got away with that. He can do anything.
Exactly. So Bundy's killing stretched across multiple states, and these are some of them. So in Utah, it was Nancy Wilcox, which was 16, and she was last seen entering a VW bug. Remember that.
Okay.
Bundy claimed he buried her near Capitol Reef National Park. Melissa Smith, 17, was the police chief's daughter, and her remains were found nude in the mountains.
Taylor Mountain?
Yep, Taylor Mountain. She had blunt force trauma and was strangled. Laura Aim, 17, was beaten and strangled, and her body was near a river. And then we go into Colorado in 1975. Karen Campbell, 23, was abducted from a hotel hallway, and her body was found 36 days later, beaten and nude in the snow. And we go back to Utah in 1974. Carol Durant escaped an abduction attempt. Let's remember her. And then we have Deborah Kent, 17, vanished after a school play. A human patella found at Bundy's Utah apartment matched her DNA years later. There is a lot. I want you to remember Carol's name, though.
Let's
And
go,
Deborah.
Carol.
In August 1975, Bundy was stopped by police in Utah. A search of his car revealed a ski mask, crowbar, handcuffs, an ice pick. While he was arrested for possession of burglary tools, investigators began linking him to missing women. He was charged with the attempted kidnapping of Carol Durant. Remember her?
Mm-hmm.
She was the one who escaped and whose identification and testimony would be a key element at Ted's first trial.
Let's go, Carol. Let's go, Carol.
Ted went to trial for the attempted kidnapping on October 2nd, 1975. So we're going to skip ahead a little bit, and we're going to come back to that first trial.
Okay.
So Bundy was arrested multiple times. Funny enough, Bundy escaped twice. Not once, twice.
How?
The first escape was on June 7th, 1977, when he escaped from a Colorado courthouse by jumping from a second-story window, and he was returned June 13th. And I can show you the pictures of this. I found the police report. We can put that up here as well, so you can see where I found it from. June 8th, June 13th.
Yeah.
So we have that, but then there's another one coming. Okay. Are we ready for that?
As ready as I can be.
The second escape was on December 30th, 1977, and he escaped from Garfield County Jail by cutting through the ceiling and walking out the front door.
Ain't no way.
He lost 30 plus pounds just to fit through. He then took a bus to Chicago and then Florida. So during all this time, he lost weight, cut through the ceiling,
so
and
y'all
just walked on out.
Y'all let him walk through the front door.
Yes.
They probably didn't recognize him if he lost all this weight.
But if people are seeing him so much, you get what I'm saying?
But he's also in, like, whatever inmate apparel.
Exactly.
That specific place. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So, that now takes us to January 15th, 1978, when Bundy broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. And in just 15 minutes, Margaret Bowman, 21, was bludgeoned with a piece of wood. Then he choked her with a nylon stocking. Lisa Levy, 20, was beaten, strangled, and bitten. Remember that. She was bitten. Because that's become a key thing.
Well, I was going to say, would that not show his teeth marks?
Yes.
We got you, fool.
But then, two others, Karen Chandler and Kathy Kaliner, survived with critical injuries. So after fleeing the sorority house, he ran west to Dunwood Street, where he attacked another woman, Cheryl Thomas, another FSU student, and beat her at her apartment, and her jaw was broken in multiple places. 3 weeks later, Bundy approached a 14-year-old in Jacksonville, but was frightened away, and that same night he abducted Kimberly Leach, 12, from her junior high school. Her remains were found weeks later near the Swanee River State Park. He was arrested on February 15th, 1978 in Pensacola, Florida, after a routine traffic stop. It was a lot.
This is making me mad.
So Bundy was only convicted of 3 murders. Only 3. It was Margaret, Lisa, and Kimberly. But he confessed to killing all the other women that I brought up, including Julie Cunningham, Denise Oliverson, and Susan Curtis. But Bundy also confessed to the Snake River Jane Doe, but the confession has never been matched to a missing person or a homicide. So we don't actually know. So now we get into a lot of his testimony stuff
Okay.
and court dates. So Bundy represented himself in court. He was smiling for cameras and cross examining witnesses, and he loved the attention he was getting from the court. He acted like the most intelligent person in the room, and the deal breaker for this was the teeth marks found on Lisa Levy's body.
Yeah, you can't deny that.
And I have other as well, like another picture from that.
We'll plop it right up here.
We sure will. Those are his teeth marks.
Oh no. No.
Are you ready to
I'm nervous.
hear this next part?
I'm nervous. Let's go.
He proposed to Carol Boone during the trial, and she accepted.
What?
They were married from 1980 to 1986, and she had his trial, Rose Bundy, while he was on death row.
It's the hair. It always does it.
Always the hair.
It's the good hair.
Backtrack to our last episode. Charles Manson.
It's the hair.
It's the hair. And
what
the guitar.
Other explanation?
That was about it. The hair and the guitar.
She probably thought that Ted was so cool because he went in there and he knew his law stuff, and he was like...
In this point, in the 70s and stuff, he was a fine man. So he was convicted in 1979 for the Chi Omega murders, and again in 1980 for Kimberly Leach's murder, which was the 12-year-old. And Bundy was sentenced to death. And while on death row, he continued to deny the murders until days before his execution. I guess he just thought that, like, if he kept it up, he wouldn't be executed. It could slowly give stuff over time.
He
like
thought he could probably find a loophole or, like, get out on good behavior or some stuff like that.
And he also conducted chilling interviews with FBI profiler Bill Hagmaier. And his confession tapes were done in third person, like, if I had done this.
I am seeing more and more similarities to my case.
Really?
Which is wild, because I'm sitting here like,
Oh no, now I'm scared. Okay. Ted admitted to necrophilia, trophy collecting, and revisiting corpses. He also claimed pornography contributed to his crimes. And you want to know something that I watched with that? Because it goes along with the last episode, Charles Manson.
Yeah.
He said that pornography did it to him. Jeffrey Dahmer said, oh, it's on me. And Charles Manson was like, I like it. It didn't do anything wrong to me. With that complex, that we were talking about in the last episode.
Uh-huh.
I saw each one of them being interviewed and saying that kind of stuff. You ready for this?
Yeah.
He also wrote letters to his fans. He had a following of women who thought he was innocent.
I'm telling you, it's because he goes in there smug and he's like, I don't have anything to worry about.
I'm perfect right here. Yeah. On January 24th, 1989, he was executed in the electric chair, and it was broadcasted on live news. This is like a big thing at this point.
Yeah.
Like with him going all over. People sold t-shirts and buttons, and there was a crowd outside the prison chanting, "Burn, Bundy, burn." And then crowds outside cheered as the prison lights dimmed. So how do you feel about all this?
I don't even know. I'm struggling because I did take, my major in college at first was psychology. And so I have looked into cases like this. And I think it just amazes me, the audacity.
Well, I have some more things that I found in archives, police reports, and court records.
There's more!
Just a little bit. Some more background stuff, some of the testimonies.
Okay.
So one of the backgrounds was Bundy worked as a night watchman at the University of Utah around August 1974. And a night watchman turns on and off the lights and locks doors. Now, I know this is not a very helpful description of what they do, but I found it in an archive of Ted Bundy's court records.
So he was always on campus?
Yes. Okay. Pretty much, night watchmen were officially janitors.
Yeah.
And Bundy claimed he did not have a badge for this position, but he wore a brown shirt that had University of Utah on it. And they would also carry walkie-talkies to communicate with the office, and he would work from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. I want to go into Carol's testimony. Do you remember who that was?
Hang on. Survivor?
Survivor.
Survivor.
Attempted kidnapping.
Taro! Okay.
Attempted kidnapping. No.
Yes.
Okay, so it is Monday, February 23rd, 1976, and this is Carol who is sharing her testimony. So the date that she got almost kidnapped was November 8th, 1974, and Carol had just finished work around 6 p.m. and then went shopping at Fashion Place Mall in Murray, Utah. And while browsing in the mall, a man approached her claiming to be Officer Roseland and said someone tried to break into her car, and he showed her a badge and convinced her to accompany him to the parking lot. He asked her what the license plate number was and told him, and he said that was the one that was being broken into. And so he claimed he asked her to come with him to the substation, and they went over to the laundromat, where he said it was the substation. So at this point, Carol's already like, "What do you mean?
What's
Like,
going
this
on?
is weird."
Yeah.
The door was locked to the laundromat, so he asked her to ride with him to the Murray police station. And so at this point, Carol's like, "I have a bad feeling about this. Why is a police officer also driving a Volkswagen Beetle?
Yeah, a little bug.
Little bug going on over there." So at this point, she asked him to show her some type of badge, but he only showed his wallet, and she went with it. So once in his Beetle, she realized something was wrong, and Bundy attempted to handcuff her. He only got it around the left wrist. He threatened her with a gun and assaulted her with a crowbar, and she fought back, escaped by opening the door since she wasn't wearing a seatbelt. He told her, he was like, "Hey, put on your seatbelt." She was like, "No." And she dropped out onto the street, and they fought out on the street, and then noticed a car heading towards her, and she was rescued by a couple, Wilbur and Mary Walsh, who drove her away, and Bundy was left behind. So after her escape, she told police about the incident, and later she was shown a lineup and identified Bundy as her attacker. And in court, she testified she never forgot his face. And I wanted to include her testimony just as an extra fact of the stuff that Ted Bundy did. And right after Carol got away, he kidnapped another girl, Deborah Kent. Remember her?
Mm-hmm.
She was kidnapped after her school play was murdered. So Carol was about to be, but since she escaped, he went after another one.
I hate it because I don't have that much to say because my mind is boggled by all of it. I cannot get in the mindset of these men, which I guess is good, but like, why? Why? Because you're sad because a girl broke up with you? You're going after these girls that look like your ex because I know that 12-year-old did not look like your ex. So at that point, what? It's just like a kink? I don't like when people idolize serial killers. Like, I can understand having a fascination because that's what ours is I want to know why they did the things that they did. Like, what impacted them so bad that they got to where they just snapped? Or is it hereditary? Like, what can it be to cause these guys to do the things that they do? But when you have people who are fangirling over them,
I mean, wrote letters to fans.
saying what? Hey, baby girl, I wish it was you in my Volkswagen Beetle. Ugh. Please. Okay.
All right, I'm ready to hear your case.
Are you ready to pivot? Because my man was not good looking.
Oh, great.
I'm going to tell you about one of the most infamous yet unexpected serial killers to date. Are you ready?
I know.
His likeness has been used on various movies and TV shows, American Horror Story most notably. And actually, his story is stuff of my own nightmares. A forewarning, I am going to leave out any detail that I find to be too descriptive or gruesome out of respect for the victims' families, as well as our listeners' stomachs. So knowing that, let's get into it. So John Wayne Gacy was born into a middle-class, blue-collar family on March 17th, 1942, and he grew up in Chicago, Illinois. Outwardly, people would say that he had a fairly normal childhood with not too much to complain about. However, behind closed doors, his relationship with his father, John Stanley Gacy, was strained. It was not good. Now, for the sake of not getting them confused, I'm going to call Dad Stanley, and his son, I'm either going to call John or Gacy. So Stanley was an alcoholic, and oftentimes he subjected Gacy to physical and verbal abuse, frequently calling him a sissy and criticizing his lack of masculinity. Stanley would beat him and his two sisters, Joanne and Karen, with a razor strap, and was also said to have physically assaulted their mom. So Gacy himself remembered being beaten at 4 years old for accidentally disorganizing car parts that his dad had been working with.
Whoa, time out. Because this is the reason, one of the reasons that a lot of people go on a killing spree.
So despite the abuse, he still admired his father and he constantly sought out his approval, which he never felt like he actually received. His younger sister Karen says that she and John were best friends growing up, and she says that his interests in things like gardening, cooking, and baking upset their father. So he is the one who experienced a lot of the drunken anger. It is safe to say that made him feel inadequate and desperate for validation, in my opinion. So Gacy's mom, Marion, was a more nurturing presence in his life, and she tried to shield her children from their father's abuse, but she was ultimately a victim of it too. So she really felt helpless and like she couldn't do very much for them. But we're going to focus back on Gacy. He had a congenital heart condition that limited his physical activities, and it led to various hospitalizations. So at 11 years old, he started experiencing blackouts and was eventually diagnosed with a blood clot in his brain. But his father accused him of faking all of it, all of his illnesses. His health issues and possibly his dad's mental impact on him contributed to him being unathletic and overweight, which also led to him being bullied and beaten up by his peers at school.
Yes.
So now that we have a small, like, scratch the surface understanding of why he is the way he is, because I did not even get into all the details, we're going to flash forward to the 60s when Gacy began working at the Nun Bus Shoe Company store in Springfield, Illinois. He developed a crush on his coworker Marlon Myers, and after 6 months of dating, they tied the knot in September of 1964 when he was just 22 years old. After their wedding, the couple moved to Waterloo, Iowa, where John Gacy took on a job as the manager of 3 different KFC restaurants, that is Kentucky Fried Chicken, that had been bought by his new father-in-law. Gacy also became active in local JC's chapter, which was like a leadership training and civics organization. He became heavily involved in the community and even recognized as, quote, outstanding vice president, and served on the board of directors for the Waterloo JCs all through the following year. In February of 1966, John and Marlon welcomed their first child, their son Michael. Their daughter Christine arrived a year later in March of 1967, and when assault accusations began arising that year, the public did not believe them. So Gacy had become a well-known, well-liked family man who was active in the community, and this just wasn't something that he was going to do. However, the accusations only continued, and in early 1968, a grand jury in Black Hawk County heard testimonies from 2 boys who alleged John had sexually assaulted them. One, a 15-year-old high school sophomore named Donald Voorhees, said that he'd been paid to spread gravel in Gacy's driveway the summer before, in '67, when Gacy had asked him to come into the house. Marlon and their son Michael were away visiting friends in Illinois at the time, so John had the house to himself, and he took advantage of that. He invited Donald in, showed him pornographic films, and then persuaded the boy to let Gacy perform oral sex on him. Then he coerced Donald into doing the same thing to him until he reached completion. Occasionally, over the upcoming fall months, he even paid Donald large sums for sex, although I couldn't figure out how much, which he felt pressured to accept. The second boy was 16-year-old Edward Lynch, who washed floors, cleaned the kitchen, and occasionally cooked in one of the KFC locations that Gacy managed. He states that after work one night, Gacy offered to drive him home, but that they ended up at Gacy's home for a quick stop instead. Michael was with his grandparents while Marlon was quite literally in the hospital giving birth to their second child, Christine, leaving Gacy at home alone again.
I don't even know what to say right now. Like, all you can see is my mouth just opening and closing.
I know. I'm trying to speak fast because I have so much information to throw at you. And so I'm trying to we're just going to go through it. And if you need to stop me or interrupt, go for it. He served Edward whiskey, put on an erotic film, and then he attacked, strangling him until he was in and out of consciousness. When the boy came to, Gacy explained that he hadn't actually meant to hurt him and that it was just supposed to be fun. Gacy drove him home shortly after and fired him from KFC a few days later. A few months passed, and it's now August of 1968. Gacy was in the thick of the assault allegation, so he ended up coercing a high school senior to intimidate Donald, the first boy to speak up. You remember him?
Yeah.
He wanted to keep him from testifying at Gacy's impending trial. The senior ended up driving Donald into the woods outside of town and sprayed mace into his eyes before beating him up and making threats on how it would be worse for him if he decides to testify. Well, Donald got free. He hid in a cornfield until the senior eventually left, and when he got back to town, he went straight to the police with the senior's identity. So they called the senior in for questioning, obviously, and the senior told police that Gacy provided the mace and promised to pay off his car loan if he did this favor for him. So on November 7th, 1968, Gacy pleaded guilty to one count of sodomy in relation to the 15-year-old boy that he'd intimidated, Donald, but pleaded not guilty to anything else. He was convicted of sodomy on December 3rd and sentenced to 10 years at the Iowa State Reformatory for Men at Anamosa. The judge commented that the severity of the sentence was to ensure that, quote, for some period of time you cannot seek out teenage boys to solicit them for immoral behavior of any kind, end quote. This same day that Gacy was sentenced, his wife, Marlon, filed for a divorce, which was eventually granted and left her with full custody of their 2 kids, the house, and the land that it sits on, along with everything in it. Their divorce was finalized on September 18, 1969, and he never spoke to or saw his ex-wife or kids ever again. Spoiler. So Gacy was the ideal inmate. He gained his GED, he managed the prison's canteen, he joined and even ran the inmate JC's organization. He became the head cook in the kitchen, and he volunteered for a bunch of programs that made him look like he'd successfully rehabilitated. So he charmed both inmates and staff, using the same manipulation tactics that he later perfected for his crimes. Reports said that he adapted well and didn't cause trouble, which is important because the parole board looks for inmates who wouldn't be like a management problem. So on June 18th, 1970, which is just 18 months after arriving when he was supposed to have 10 years, he was granted parole for good behavior on the condition that he live with his mother in Chicago and have a 12-month probation period. Side note, once he got back to Chicago, he got a job as a line cook. I couldn't find for which restaurant, but it wasn't a KFC. But he would often talk about how his ex-wife was the daughter of Colonel Sanders, who founded KFC, which was an absolute lie, but it made him popular around the restaurant. Like, it made a lot of people like him because, ooh, your kids are the grandkids of Colonel Sanders.
This could have been prevented if he stayed in there for 10 years.
Yeah. So in February of 1971, 8 months after he was released from the reformatory, 15-year-old Jack Hanley from Chicago told the police that Gacy had picked him up and tried to force him to have sex. Gacy was arrested for assault and said that the boy had been hitchhiking. He propositioned him, and when the boy said no, he threw him out of the car and drove off. Unfortunately, Jack never showed up to testify, so the charges were dropped, and the Iowa Parole Board never found out about the incident. While working at the restaurant, Gacy began side gigs, just making more money, before starting his own business called PDM, Contractors for Painting, Decorating, and Maintenance. He ended up needing a bigger place to store the tools and supplies that he would use, so in August of 1971, he and his mother moved to a larger house in a suburb called Norwood Park. This is the house that if you've ever heard anything about Gacy, um, this is where it all happened. So the next bit is going to be a bit jarring. The first boy that Gacy killed was one that he picked up at the Greyhound bus station and brought home in January of 1972. Gacy's mother was spending the night at her sister's, so it was prime opportunity to be alone. He made the teenager a few alcoholic drinks, they went down on each other, and then they went to bed in separate rooms for the night. The next morning, Gacy woke up to the boy standing in the doorway of his bedroom with a kitchen knife in one hand. Gacy charged at the boy, they wrestled, and the boy was stabbed 4 times in his chest, resulting in asphyxiation on his blood. John was disgusted at the sound of the fluid in the boy's windpipe, so he left the room and didn't return until the struggle stopped. He dumped the boy's body into a crawl space via a small trap door in the floor of his bedroom closet. No one ever learned of the boy's name until years later, so they just referred to the missing boy as the Greyhound bus boy. But we now know that he was 18-year-old Jack McCoy. Toward the end of 1971, Carol Hoff, which is a friend of Gacy's sister, Karen, often visited John and his mom at their house, and this is relevant, so just hang with me here for a second. Gacy was kind to her 2 daughters, and she loved listening to him talk. So when his mom heard that she was struggling to pay rent and offered for her and her kids to move in, Carol accepted, gratefully. John eventually confided in Carol about the trouble that he'd been in while living in Iowa, and also that he was bisexual, which is the first time that he ever admitted it. But Carol claims that she thought he was kidding and messing around because it was all followed by laughter and lighthearted remarks. So they grew close, they began dating, and Gacy's mom moved out right before they tied the knot. Carol and John got married on July 1st, 1972. But the thing is, 9 days earlier, 9 days before their wedding, Gacy had convinced a boy that he was a deputy sheriff and ordered him into the car. He forced the boy to perform oral sex on him and then tried to run over the boy when he jumped out of the car. Gacy was arrested, but for some reason, his charges were dropped completely, and his fiancée never found out about it, and we still do not know the boy's identity to this day. So throughout the summer of 1972, Carol complained of a foul smell that she expressed she thought was from a decaying animal coming from that crawl space. Flies swarmed the closet, and Gacy used the excuse of a broken sewer pipe under the house and how there must be a leak. And the smell only got worse over time. Carol left on a trip over the summer, and while she was gone, he poured concrete over just a section of the crawl space in hopes of concealing any remnants of his crime. However, the smell persisted faintly. Gacy's sister Karen visited often, and in an interview with Oprah in 2010, she says, when he and Carol moved in, there was always this kind of musty smell, and that he claimed it was resting water under the house, and how the smell was from mold, and how he was treating it with lime, so she never actually had any real suspicions of her brother. A year passed, and in the summer of 1973, Gacy took over the garage for his contracting business, instructing his wife and 2 stepdaughters to stay out of it. He began disappearing more and more overnight, and one evening Carol was looking for cleaning products, and she ran across a pornographic magazine of men underneath the kitchen sink. She states that this is when her sex life with John became non-existent. In early 1975, Gacy's mom moved to Arkansas, and she broke her hip over the summer. So Carol and her daughters ended up flying out to take care of his mom, and while he was home alone, Gacy strangled a boy who worked for his company and buried him underneath the garage floor. In October, Carol asked John for a divorce, but they lived together until the following February. So during that time, Gacy continued to pick up boys and pay them for sex, but did not kill any of them until April. By the end of 1976, he'd killed 6 more boys, but the only name released from this year at all is John Butkovich, who was 18 at the time. The summer of 1976 is when we're introduced to Pogo the Clown. Gacy began performing at children's hospitals, parades, charity events, birthday parties, and store openings as a funny, energetic clown. And if you look at the pictures, he's got white face paint, he has blue eyes, and then a big red smile, right? He eventually introduced Patches the Clown to his act when he realized how much the community loved his little show. So we're going to move on to 1977. Gacy was briefly engaged, and his fiancee moved into his stinky little house of horrors in April. They argued often, and after only a few months, he demanded that she pack her things and get out. What she didn't know, though, was that during their relationship, he was still out coercing men. In March of 1977, so we're just going back, like a month. 20-year-old John Stephen Prestige told police that Gacy enticed him into his car in downtown Chicago by offering him a little bit of weed before using chloroform to knock him unconscious. He said that Gacy drove him to his house, handcuffed him, and sexually attacked him before eventually letting him go. A $3,000 civil suit was settled, and Gacy was charged with battery, but got out of the charges due to lack of evidence and the fact that the man wasn't a minor. He was 20. December 31st, 1977, 19-year-old Robert Donnelly went to the Cook County Police with claims that he'd been waiting at the bus stop a little after midnight when John Gacy pulled up to the curb in front of him. Gacy pulled a gun on him, claiming to be a police officer, and forced him to get into the car. He took the boy to his house, and at this point, I want to spare some of the gruesome details on what all occurred just for our listeners' mental well-being. It was a lot. I could not even get through all of the details for it. It made me sick. But what I will say is that the boy told the police that he was in so much pain, he was begging John Gacy to kill him. In the morning, Gacy cleaned him up, drove him to work, and told him, quote, "You won't report this. You're just going to forget that it ever happened." But Robert immediately went to the police to provide a statement. Later that day, John was arrested in Chicago, and he admitted to the acts, but he claimed that Robert was a willing participant who only went to the police because he was mad that Gacy hadn't paid him for the sex yet. An assistant state's attorney decided not to prosecute, and there was even a comment made from someone close to the case stating, "It was a one-on-one situation with Gacy's word against the kids. There were no witnesses." Infuriating, isn't it? On March 21st, 1978, 26-year-old Jeffrey Rignall was waiting outside the bar. He saw Gacy on the street, and he flagged him down to ask directions to a club that he wanted to visit. He didn't know how to get there. Gacy said that he knew the way, and he offered him a ride since he'd been drinking already. The man was chloroformed as soon as he got into Gacy's car, taken to Gacy's home, and again, I'm going to spare the details because they are very intense, but he was tortured for hours while in and out of consciousness. The next day, he woke up at Lincoln Park with his pants unzipped, his rectum bleeding, and his face burned from the chemicals. He identified Gacy's photo from a lineup, but police didn't pursue any charges. Gacy settled with him personally for $3,000. We're going to jump to June of 1978. David Cram was new to Chicago and he was looking for work. He met John Wayne Gacy through mutual acquaintances because keep in mind how popular Gacy is with the community. And so David was quickly offered to work at Gacy's company, PDM Contractors, along with an extra room to stay in at Gacy's house since he'd just gotten into town and was hitchhiking still. Things seemed normal at first. John was very outgoing and seemingly trustworthy, so David did move in with him shortly after receiving the offer. One night in June, Gacy came into David's room wearing his Pogo the Clown costume like a weirdo, and he told David he wanted to show him a trick and convinced him to let him put on handcuffs. Once David was cuffed, Gacy told him, "The trick is you have to get out of the cuffs." So David managed to slip one hand free. When Gacy lunged toward him, David shoved him away and freed himself entirely. Gacy dropped the act and just laughed it off. A few days later, Gacy tried again, and this time without his clown costume. He approached David with the handcuffs, but David refused to put them on, and that pissed him off. Gacy attempted to force him into them anyways, and they ended up in a physical struggle. David overpowered Gacy and put the cuffs on him instead, which made him laugh and reportedly say something like, "Not bad. You're the first person to ever put the cuffs on me." After that second incident, David Cram was quick to move out of the guest room, though he continued working for Gacy a little longer before he eventually quit. In an interview with the A&E channel, he reports being asked to dig trenches in Gacy's crawl spaces, but that he was unaware that they were going to be used for graves. Plot twist. After David moved out, Gacy extended the job and room offered to 18-year-old Michael Rossi, who reported the same tasks being given to him: digging trenches and pouring lime into the crawlspace to fight odor, but both boys deny having any knowledge of his crimes whatsoever, and they lived with him. In a 1999 biography, which is a show on the A&E channel, David revealed that both he and Michael Rossi had lived with Gacy separately and were sexually coerced, saying, "We were essentially made into our boss's sex slaves, taking part in oral and anal acts whenever Gacy wanted, and in return they would receive perks like access to the company vehicles and even jewelry that belonged to Gacy's victims under the guise of being just bonuses, just stuff that he bought for the boys." No one could testify that they'd ever seen John Wayne Gacy with any of the boys that he was about to kill, and the police assumed the influx of missing boys in 1978 were all runaways. That was until December 11th, 1978, when he killed a boy who'd already told somebody that he was on his way to see Gacy about a potential contracting job. When the boy didn't return home for his mom's birthday party that evening, the police finally turned to Gacy. On December 12th, which is the next day, he was called into the police station for questioning. Gacy called Lieutenant Kozenchak at 11 p.m., saying that he could be there in 30 minutes. The investigators waited until 1 a.m. and he never showed, so they finally filed for a search warrant in the meantime while they were waiting. What they didn't know is that during this time, John was moving the body of his most recent killing from his attic to the trunk of his car and dumping the boy in Des Plaines River. But guess what? John got into a wreck. So he slides off of the icy road and has to call a tow truck to pull him out of a snowbank at 2 a.m. So records from the tow truck company helped the investigators narrow down like a general area that he'd been in during the time that he was supposed to be at the station. And at 3:20 a.m. on December 13th, Gacy walks into the Des Plaines police station covered from waist down in mud. He gives a brief statement, and Lieutenant Kozenchak asks Gacy for his house and car keys, showing him the search warrant they'd obtained. Gacy threw a little hissy fit, but eventually handed them over, and at his house they find items belonging to the missing boy from December 11th. They seize the 3 vehicles to search later, but they find nothing incriminating. So Gacy was released from holding at 11 p.m. So this is now the next day. So after being watched around the clock for a week now, on the 19th, Gacy invited 2 police officers in for breakfast. So both of them immediately recognized the smell of death. So they began searching the house, and ultimately they still found nothing. Gacy's lawyers filed a $750,000 civil rights lawsuit against the police department and the town for harassment and illegal searches, While still under surveillance, John is seen selling weed to a gas station clerk on December 21st, which finally gave them grounds for an arrest. Police are told that Gacy got heavily drunk the night before and confessed to his lawyer that he committed maybe 30 murders. His home is searched that day, and Gacy says he did kill someone, but it was in self-defense. And he showed them how he buried the body under the concrete in his garage, and he did end up leading the police to it. So the following day, he tells the police that he'd killed 32 young men after using them for sexual pleasure. He speaks of himself in third person, saying the murders were committed by John or Jack. He's charged with first-degree murder for the most recent killing until they know exactly to which extent he's telling the truth. He reenacts the different killings, shows the police where and how they were executed, and even uses spray paint to block out where the bodies were stashed in that hidey hole. From December of 1978 to February of 1979, intensive excavation is done on his home and his property. By the time the investigation concluded in March of '79, he'd been charged with 33 counts of murder, sexual assault charges tied to his surviving victims, and kidnapping charges for the abductions that didn't end in death. Gacy's defense tried an insanity plea, claiming that he had multiple personality disorder and was unaware of his actions. But this was countered by his own detailed statements describing his plans, written down. Trial began on February 6, 1980, until March 13th, when he was sentenced to death for 12 of the murders, plus multiple life sentences for the remainder of the lives that he took. He spent 14 years on death row at Menard Correctional Center, and on May 10, 1994, John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection at 12:58 a.m. His last words were, "Kiss my ass." A little fact for you guys is that on May 14th of the same year, bidders spent up to $20,000 to obtain the paintings and art from Gacy's home that he liked to collect. And honestly, it was just a bunch of clown memorabilia. He liked to paint, and he painted a picture of him in his Pogo the Clown costume. But with more than 200 people in attendance, they put everything that they acquired in a pile and set it on fire. They had a parking lot bonfire to destroy everything that Gacy loved. The money made off of the bids was distributed to the families of his victims, and this was all set up by the community that once loved him. Unidentified victims from his crawl space continued to be identified through DNA testing, the most recent being in 2021. 5 victims still remain unidentified as of 2025, and the FBI are still searching for IDs. John Wayne Gacy doesn't deserve to be remembered, if I'm being blunt, but his victims do. They were sons, brothers, uncles, friends. So if you take anything from this story, let it be this. Remember the victims. Not the man who wore the clown makeup, not the monster who hid in plain sight, but the boys and the young men whose lives were stolen from them. Some of their names we know, some we may never learn, but every single one of them mattered. And as you turn off this episode tonight, I'm asking that you carry them with you, because forgetting them or their stories is just letting him win.
Do you know the Alcatraz Museum in Pigeon Forge?
Yes.
Have you been?
No.
They have Ted Bundy's first car that he used because he had two in there. And at the very beginning, they have John Wayne Gacy's clown costumes and books that were written on him.
Patches is scary. It neither of them look like children's clowns. You know what I mean? Eek.
Also, we're using one mic at the moment because I realized during that time my mic stopped working.
All right, besties. The snacks are gone. The candles, they're burning low.
And the ghostly and grim are tucking themselves back into the shadows, at least until next time.
Don't forget to follow us on all the socials and subscribe so that you never miss our late night story session. This is a sleepover.
Until then, keep your PJs cozy, your snacks stocked,
And
and keep chasing midnight. Night, night, love you.
Night, night, love you.